There's no easy way to tell the tale of facing a Wendigo. I won't give my name away, so my name will be Alex, due to the severity of this story. Before you read on, no one detrimental detail. This story is 100% true without over-exaggeration. So please, without further wait, let's begin my horrifying and eye-opening experience. On September 13th of 2016, I was driving up the Bighorn Mountains above Buffalo, Wyoming. Just like every trip, I packed accordingly 2 bottles of water, 6 Nutri-Grain bars, and my loaded handgun. I drove up 4 to 5 times per week, never worrying on ghost stories or monsters. As far as I knew, these mountains were harmless, besides predators seldomly seen and weather interference. But something in me changed on September 13th. Instead of going to my usual neck of the woods, I went to a remote campsite known as Thickened, 15 miles up from town. It's a beautiful place where, if you cross the fence, you can climb to a peak and oversee for days. As I was looking over the majestic snow-covered landscape, I saw a tall, slender figure marching through the blanket of powder. Normally, I would drop it as a hunter on the move, but Thickened was far from any known hunting locations. To this day, I wish I would have packed up and left. I wish I didn't peek through my binoculars. But sometimes, securing curiosity is the only safe option. I'll never let myself forget the moment I peered through the cold glass over the winter plateau. As I focused my lenses and the figure came to clarity, I dropped behind the rocks. It was looking back at me, as if it could see me. That would be impossible for a human. I was 1,000 feet away or more, hidden by a rock and within the tree line. I peeked back up, using only the top of my head to look again. It was just standing there, sniffing the air, looking at me. My heart sank and I couldn't move. I was frozen in fear. About 200 feet behind me was a small rock cave, big enough to squeeze into and deep enough to hide in the dark. I slowly made my way, inching backwards. I took one last look and noticed it was sprinting towards me. I moved as fast as possible to the hole and tucked in. The moment I made it, the creature was standing feet from where I was. Its skin was damp in appearance and grey. It also had long hands and fingers to match that turned to dagger-like nails. I cupped my mouth to hide my breathing, which became a challenge due to the cold. But as I moved my hand, a rock tumbled. I looked down at the rock, just to look back up and see its cold eyes peering through the hole. It was almost as if it couldn't see me, but it knew something was there. I stood still as a statue. It reached in, almost grasping my pack. After 5 minutes of forever, it gave up and took back to sniffing. I waited there in shock and a daunting weight of fright casting over me every moment in passing. It quickly got dark as night fell and it finally wandered off. I waited until I felt assured to poke my head out. I took a look around and saw nothing, not even a footprint. I took time in watching my steps to stay quiet and made my way back down to my car. I used my key to unlock it rather than using the button lock. I got in and sank down and took a last look around. I finally found courage to crank my car and began to drive down the trail to the main highway. As I was just about to turn around, I saw it. It stood as tall as the trees and stared at me. I hit the gas and fishtailed it, but I made it. As I reached the main road, it was in pursuit and was keeping up. After a few miles, I looked back and it was gone. To this day, I haven't been back, not even to that region of the mountains. Looking it up, I found several myths about the creature and its origins. I believe you should too. It's quite unique. Stay safe and know the world is far more vast than we know. As a teenager, I would visit my grandma at her home on the Navajo Res for several weeks every summer. I loved to spend time with her, eat her delicious fried bread, and hear her tell us stories. Every so often my grandma would hire a worker, the harmless town drunk, to do odd jobs around her house and property. One evening, right before the sun went down, I was asked by my grandma to take him home, which was about 4 miles out of the valley where she lived. I was more than happy to, seeing that I was only 14 years old and was asked to drive a truck. Mind you, that on the res, nobody cares that you're only 14 years old and driving around. Hell, there's hardly anybody around to see you anyway. So my 9-year-old brother jumped in the truck cab with me while this worker and my dog shared the tailgate of the truck and we were off. After I dropped the worker off at the shack that he and his brothers called a house, we headed back down the road to Grandma's. As I mentioned before, it was evening and the sky was a deep red as the sun began to set behind us. We were leaving a nice dust trail from the dirt road and the radio was playing music from the only radio station that could be picked up from the nearest town of Holbrook, Arizona. There was nothing unusual, nothing weird. It was at this time that my eye caught movement of something in the bushes a little up the road to the right of us. I remember slowing down, thinking that it was one of the many free-roaming sheep in the area that would dart out in front of the truck. As I passed where I thought I saw it, I sped up, thinking nothing else of it. And then, out of nowhere, I just felt this dark feeling of fear and dread. I had no idea why I was feeling this way, but I definitely felt that something was wrong. As I play this memory back in my mind, there are only a few clear memories that I have of that evening. I clearly remember looking in my rear view mirror and seeing the dark silhouette of something very tall and very skinny that seemed to be covered with some kind of hair or fur running behind the truck after us. Whatever it wasn't a normal human or human at all. I remember hearing my brother crying and my dog barking ferociously at whatever was chasing us. I remember speeding very fast and shaking violently as the truck bounced on the washboard dirt road. I distinctly remember that this thing was only getting closer as my brother cried, "It's coming up on your side." I remember being as scared as hell and thinking that I didn't want to die. At the moment that I thought would be our last, I remember speeding around a bend in the road and seeing a car coming towards us in the opposite direction. At that moment I felt instant relief and felt that whatever was following us was gone. Shaken up but alive, we made it to Grandma's house, wondering what the hell had just happened. We ran inside, not looking back, hoping that whatever was chasing us had not followed us home. As we told my grandma about our experience, she didn't seem too surprised, which surprised us. She continued by repeating stories that we had already heard at one point or another about black magic, witches, and something that the Navajos call Naldlushii, or skinwalkers. Needless to say, I didn't even want to look out any of the windows at all the rest of that night. As a matter of fact, I never drove on the reservation at night until I was 21 years old. Without going too deep into explanation, I'll just say that these skinwalkers are evil men and spirits that use black magic for evil doing. I tell you that, as far-fetched as it may sound, they are real. I believe that if God and His greatness are real, the devil is equally as real and also has his ways of showing himself. This may not sound very scary to some readers, and that may be due to my lack of writing skills, but what happened that evening really did happen and scared the living crap out of me. I invite anybody to visit this part of Arizona if you have any doubt on one huge scare. I promise you that you won't be disappointed. My father owns a small delivery service that operates out of Farmington, New Mexico. We mostly deliver small packages out to the middle of nowhere that are too much of a hassle for the larger delivery companies to bother with. My dad is the only employee, and we have a few pickup trucks and a trailer. One day, we get a delivery out to Window Rock, Arizona, on the Navajo reservation, about 2 hours from Farmington. My dad gets the call for the job while he's chilling with his Navajo friend, Travis, and his girlfriend. Travis mentions how he's got family in Window Rock that he hasn't seen in ages and suggests they go with him. I was about 6 or 7 at the time, and it was the summertime, so Dad decides we'll go down together. He can do his delivery really quick, then while Travis sees his family, we can go check out the Window Rock. Big rock face with a large hole in it that goes to the other side. Pretty cool. We had to convoy in separate trucks since my dad's was loaded down with freight. We decided to bring along some walkie-talkies so we could communicate with one another. We spend our time in Window Rock. Everything is generally uneventful, and we start heading home along the old highway with my dad and I in front, and Travis and his girlfriend in their truck behind us. I honestly don't remember most of the Window Rock trip, but this next part I can never forget. We're somewhere on the highway between Window Rock and Gallup. It had just rained earlier in the day, and the road was kind of slick, so we were taking it pretty slow. On the left of the highway there's nothing but sandstone cliffs, and on the right there is a huge field separated from the road by a small barbed wire fence. We crest the top of this hill, and down at the bottom of the hill we see what appears to be a very large dog, sitting back on its haunches in the middle of the road, facing the cliffs. My dad calls over the radio. "Hey Trav, do you see that big ass dog?" Travis starts yelling back over the radio. "That is not a dog. Speed up right now and hit it." He sounds almost hysterical. He just keeps screaming, "Hit it. Jay, you have to hit it, please. Hit that fucking thing right now." So my dad starts to speed up, and as we get a bit closer, I can begin to see it a little more clearly. It's covered in this brown, wiry, matted hair that appears to have dried blood all over it. It's still facing the cliffs, but the moment our headlights hit it, it turns and looks at us, and it has a face. I don't know how else to describe it other than a mix between a bear's and a human's face. It looks twisted and distorted and almost in pain. As we get closer to this thing, we start to realize it's actually fucking huge. Though it was still sitting on its haunches, it's about shoulder height with the hood of the truck. We get literally inches from hitting it when it lets out this scream that sounds like someone screaming as their lungs were filling with water, and it leaps backwards towards the field, landing just on our side of the barbed wire fence. Then with another leap, it was gone from sight. Travis comes over the radio again. "Holy shit. Keep driving. We have to get out of here. We have to go faster." He kept repeating in the last part. We have to get out of here, and we have to go faster. Pretty soon, we're speeding like crazy, and just as we start to come near the outskirts of Gallup, we get pulled over. Travis pulls his truck over with us. Naturally, this makes the cop, a Navajo man himself, very on edge, and he immediately asks why Travis felt the need to pull over as well. Travis says, "We just saw a Skinwalker a few miles back, and it's been following us." The officer immediately turns white, stammers something about a verbal warning, gets in his car, and takes off. We do the same. We didn't see anything else that night, but when we got home, Travis refused to let us leave without taking some kind of Navajo totem thing that was supposed to keep it away. Anybody that has been on the Navajo reservation has either probably heard of some creepy things or have experienced pretty creepy things, namely skinwalkers. I have only seen one. Here is my story. I come from a small town in northern Arizona, a sandwich between the Paiute reservation to the north and the US's largest Navajo reservation to the south. My high school being so small, a 1A high school that has, on average, 80 students enrolled every year, always had to travel south about 5 to 10 hours one way to play another high school in any sport. This means that we traveled a lot on the Navajo reservation. And we also usually stayed at hotels when we would head out to play and come home in the morning. But this trip was a little bit different. I remember the basketball coach saying that the school didn't have enough money to put up the teams in a hotel that trip, so we were going to be on the road for a total of about 12 hours. I was the only male senior to play basketball that season, We had just got done playing our game and headed home on our bus, Big Blue. We were headed out and it wasn't long, about 2 hours of driving, before we had entered the reservation. By this time, everyone was asleep, with it being about 2 in the morning. When we had crossed the res's border, I noticed the bus driver had sped up and was now going about 85 miles per hour. I thought this was a little weird because he never exceeded the speed limit, at least not in my high school career. For some reason, I couldn't fall asleep like the rest of my teammates, and I just sat at the back of the bus, staring out across the desolate desert landscape that was lit up by the full moon. As I looked out, I could see a figure running towards the bus at an angle of pursuit, and keeping up with the bus at 85 miles per hour. As the figure got closer, I saw that it was a humanoid form. As a matter of fact, it looked exactly like a human, only that the face was painted half black and half white with glowing eyes. Glowing eyes like a rabbit's eyes, reflecting light from a spotlight. I immediately thought, holy crap, it's a skinwalker. The skinwalker ran up to the edge of the road and just kept up pace with the bus, hurling sagebrush and rocks while staring at me. After I made eye contact with the thing, I could not look away. It was as if something was holding my head and eyes in place. The skinwalker just smiled at me in this inhuman smile that went ear to ear, showing crooked, yellow, pointed teeth. I felt like I was going to throw up, and I was panicking through the whole ordeal. The skinwalker started to crumple down on all fours, still keeping up with the bus. I could see his bones crack and reform. Hair started appearing all over the skinwalker's body, and in about 3 seconds was now a coyote, and it ran off back into the desert out of view. As soon as it was gone, I ran to the onboard bathroom and puked a mixture of food and blood. I didn't want to tell anyone for fear they would think I was crazy. I confided in my Navajo friend. She told me that I needed to see the chief, who also happened to be a friend of mine, and get a blessing. I saw him the next school day in the parking lot. He just came up to me and mumbled something in Navajo while waving a feathered scepter-like thing, turned around, got in his truck, and drove away. To this day, I haven't seen another skinwalker. It might be due to the fact that I moved away from that town and res, and if I do have to go south, I go around. Way around. I was a kid when this happened. My uncle and I were finishing up chopping and gathering firewood for my grandmother because it was getting dark. Driving back on a dirt road at about 30 miles per hour, I had this awful sense of being watched. Before I could turn to look out my window, my uncle quickly shouted, "Don't." I completely froze. My heart felt like it was beating out of my chest and completely stopped when I heard a tap, tap on my window. My uncle sped up and was loudly praying in my native language. I didn't know what was going on and thought it was over, till our truck suddenly dipped from the bed. My uncle then started saying, "Look at me and don't turn away," over and over. Then I heard it again, tap, tap. But from the window behind me. It was getting harder for me to breathe and I wanted to cry. A minute or two passed and the truck dipped again. My uncle looked around inside. It was quiet besides the truck and the road. He looked at me and said, "We will ask your father to do a praying in the morning, so the evil will forget our faces." I remember curling up on the seat and just staring at the radio, watching the time, listening to my uncle sing an old prayer till we got to my grandmother's house. I called my uncle because I had a nightmare about that night. We talked about it for a bit. He said, "I didn't see faces, just eyes, like brake lights you see in the road. It watched you." Before hanging up, I tried joking with him about it. "Why didn't you just step on the brake when it was in the back?" No laughter. Just a pause. Because it wasn't alone. As many of you might already know, many Navajo people are very reluctant to speak about skinwalkers because it is believed to attract their attention. Well, I, however, grew up away from the Navajo Nation and was very naive about the subject. When it came to skinwalkers, I was an absolute skeptic. My mom used to tell us a story of how back in the 80s, when she lived with her siblings and my grandparents, about how she and my aunt saw a skinwalker just outside their driveway under a streetlight. She described it as a black dog with dirty fur, a twisted noodle-like front leg, and these unnatural eyes with a soft burnt orange glow. Me, being my own closed-minded self, doubted every word, but I never said my doubts aloud. But these doubts totally changed last year when I went to my grandparents' house last October. Me and my family had just finished scourging the carnival at the Navajo Nation Fair and called it a night. The house was close enough where we could walk home in just 10 minutes, so we did. When we got there, it was about 9 at night, where we stayed up until about 2, catching up about family affairs and the local news. It was during that time that I just decidedly opened my mouth and blurted out the question, "Hey, are skinwalkers real? Guys?" I asked. "You shouldn't be speaking about that," my grandma said with almost a disturbed yell in her voice. So she and my grandfather both decided to go to bed. After being scolded by my mom, one of my aunts chimes in with a very cautious tone and says, "They're real, alright." And a few started screaming outside of my trailer in Farmington just a few nights ago. Your cousin had a nightmare the whole night and woke up crying that morning. Not wanting to push the discomfort any further, we all decided to go to bed. Now the trailer is pretty old and it was a really nice night, so we slept with the windows open with screens to prevent bugs coming in. Everyone had drifted off to sleep except me, because my mind was still going on a million miles a minute about skinwalkers and wondered if I ever encounter one while here on the reservation. That's when the shit totally hit the fan. Just as I was settling and finally getting relaxed for sleep, I started to hear something moving outside. I get up from the couch and start wandering over to the kitchen window. In the trailer, all of the rooms have the lights out, so the only visible light that can be seen is from the porch light out front. I was thankful for this because I told myself if it really was a skinwalker outside, then hopefully it wouldn't notice me seeing it. so I muster up the courage and take a quick scan of outside. From the porch light, all I can see is the dusty ground and the vehicles that my family drove, along with some old metal trash cans that stood beside the road. Looking for about a good 5 seconds, I wasn't able to see anything, so I was getting ready to turn around and walk back to bed, thinking it was just a stray cat or something. Only I've taken 2 steps. I hear what sounded like a distorted scream coming from outside, definitely close by. Fear rising, I look outside again, and there I see it. A coyote-like figure was staring in my direction from behind the cars, just outside of the reach of the porch light. Only it looked awfully wrong and gave off an evil vibe just from seeing it. It was grey with very disheveled hair, and a horrific orange-red soft glow came from its eyes. I noped the hell out and ran back to the bedroom. It was at this moment I had begun to also notice an awful stench in the air that smelled like rotting meat. I started trying to wake up my mom, who was like, "Oh my god, it's almost 3 a.m, what do you want?" I immediately began in a shaken voice. "There's something scary outside." And then she said, now annoyed because I woke her up, "It's probably just a stray animal or something. It's a reservoir. Animals wander all the time at night." She obviously wasn't getting the drift of what I was saying, so I screamed, "There's some Blair Witch Project shit going out outside, Ma." That got her attention. "What? What the hell are you talking about?" she said. And then we heard it. The thing outside started making more of its dreadful like screams, and started what sounded like thrashing outside on the ground. Hear that? That's what I'm talking about. So both her and I got back up, looked outside the window, and the coyote thing was making its way to the door. It walked with an odd limp and dragged its back right leg as if it was handicapped. We could hear it start to scratch against the door and make this odd, muffled moaning sound. My mom went to get my dad, and they both started shouting in Navajo all sorts of words, telling the thing to go away and saying it's not welcome here. Well, all this commotion was enough to get the rest of the trailer up as they came out onto the hallway. The only thing my mom did was turn to them and said, "Skinwalker," while proceeding to point to the door. Apparently they already knew exactly what to do, as my grandfather got out a handgun from a drawer and a bag of ashes. He coated a few bullets and loaded them into the gun and went straight to the door. Yelling out more Navajo that was too fast for me to comprehend, he swung open the door and fired twice. Nothing. The thing managed to escape before my grandpa could put a bullet in it. "That's the fastest one I've ever seen," said my grandpa. Next thing you know, my aunts and my parents are freaking out about what just happened, saying stuff like, "What if it comes back tomorrow?" And, "It's us. Does that mean we're targets now?" Afterwards, my grandparents calmed everyone down, saying we'll be fine, and we all went to bed. It was about 3 a.m. Morning comes, and my grandparents call one of their neighbors and explain to them what happened. Apparently one of them was a medicine man who used to partake in Yay by Jay, Navajo ceremonies used for healing and curing sickness, and came over to bless each family member and the grounds outside.